we are Coping Life Talk number 90. Our guest today, believe it or not, Leah Boas, right? Bias. You are an award-winning journalist. Wow, that is impressive. And also an author. So we are so honored to host you in our number 90 podcast, Coping Life Talk. And I'm Lydia Istomina. Our co-hosts are Candy Sheehan. Hi, Candy. And Scott Kiddle. Our motto is helping people in difficult situations to develop coping skills, and the main goal is to develop resilience. So your story, Leah, is amazing, and it shows your strength, your courage, and your resilience. Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Leah Baez, like you said. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska, and still live here now. And, my journey is really interesting because, I knew for a long time that I was my own way. I knew for a long time that I was holding myself back, but I didn't know how to break those habits. I didn't know how to break that cycle of, alcoholism and self-sabotage and the things and doing things in my life that were just taking me nowhere. And so it wasn't until some key moments in my life that I was able to really thrust out of that darkness and push past some of those really difficult times. And I'm so grateful to be able to share some of that with your audience, and also just share the power of storytelling and how we can better ourselves just by looking within.
This is wonderful. It seems like a short introduction, right, Candy and Scott? But it is so pregnant, so much to hear. Yeah. So it is a story, and it is a very personal story. I like how you have it listed and shared on your web site, that you say how scared you felt when you were asked to speak to many people. Why was that? What was so scary?
Scary about opening up and sharing my story, you mean? Or
yes,
Sure. I think a lot of us are afraid to admit we fail. A lot of us have this, we hold ourselves to really high standards. And so when we are admitting that we aren't our best, and when we are admitting that we failed or made a mistake, that's really hard. And, we don't want to deal with shame. Shame is really hard to understand and to wrap our head around. And if we can avoid shame, we do it at all costs, right? So I was afraid to tell my story because I just wasn't confident enough yet. And I felt like I was so worried about what other people would think of me and how they would judge me that I wasn't looking at the bigger picture. Now I can tell you that I know that sharing my story has helped so many people around the world, and then it's also helped me because it's helped me to understand that those hard times in my life weren't just a waste, right? That pain had a purpose, and I was really able to see how just sharing my story can impact one person. And for me, that was so uplifting because it was a reminder that we're not alone. No matter what we go through in life, there's somebody who is dealing with the same struggles or somebody who's going through that same thing. And so that no matter what you're going through in life, you are not alone. And so that's what was so uplifting for me to know, is that when I shared my story, so many people came to me and said, wow, I can relate, or thank you so much for being brave. I'm going through the same thing. And that was so comforting to know.
Yes, Scott and I both want to jump right on this. Yep. Is it okay if I go first, Scott? Okay. What I was wondering, Leah, you said when you opened up and shared, and I would suspect there'd be people listening to us right now that said, yeah, but how do you do that? You're not going to go on Facebook and maybe splash it all over. Did you have the support of your own family? Did you have a close group of friends? Was there a group you were connected with? They might not know how to open up and share because they may not have the venue that's necessary right now. How did you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a journalist. So I'm a writer. I'm a storyteller by nature. So I journaled regularly. So even though I was going through these hard times, even though I wasn't opening up, with the world yet, I was still writing down my feelings. I was still going through those emotions and those hard times on paper, and that was very cathartic for me. So that kind of, I felt like, broke the ice, if you will, with me turning this pain into a story and to make sense of it, right? Because when we're writing our story down, we're able to really analyze and understand, why things happen, and see how things happen. But also then we are able to say, I'm going to stop this chapter here and I'm going to start new and I'm going to change my life and I'm going to do better. And so what I would encourage anyone to do is to start with journaling. You can write to yourself. I used to write letters to myself just about how I was feeling and the things that I was going through. And I know I haven't brought up some of the issues that I dealt with, but I was sexually abused as a child. I was also an alcoholic. I was in very abusive relationships since high school, and so I had a lot of trauma. And I know I didn't really go into that with your audience yet, but I carried a lot of trauma, and so writing for me was super important. So I encourage anyone to start with journaling. But the next avenue I would say is, just opening up to a friend. Sometimes we keep things buried in for so long that it's nice to just bring that up again and just to kind of let it go when you're able to talk to somebody about it. So you don't necessarily have to share it with the world or do anything wild right away, but just opening up to someone is a huge help. So the reason I had the opportunity to share my story with millions of people across the world was because I was selected to be the commencement speaker during graduation for my master's degree in 2018. And as a journalist, I knew telling real stories and being authentic was going to captivate the audience. And so I knew I had to just give them a story that would really tug at their heartstrings. And so I went straight in, and I was so nervous to tell this story because, like I said before, it was carried a lot of shame for me, a lot of embarrassment. But I went right in, and I admitted that I had failed in my marriage, failed as a mother. I was going through a tough divorce and a rough custody battle, unlike anything I'd experienced before. And so to be able to let that out and to speak my truth was so healing for me. And so that opportunity to speak in front of all those people was so nerve-wracking, but it made an impact. And it made such an impact that it was picked up by this media company called Goalcast, and they shared it with millions of people all over the world. And so I got flooded with messages from people in Europe, and I even had, someone from Australia and India, and just all these amazing places all over the world saying how they can resonate with my story because they're experiencing the same thing. And how warm does that make you feel to know that it doesn't matter where we are on this planet, we are all going through the same similar obstacles. And so when we can lock together and when we can support each other, we can rely on each other, wow, we can really get through so much. Resilient, and do whatever we want regardless of what we go through. So back to the original question, my story really took off because of that commencement speech, but just because you want to open up or share your story doesn't have to start that large. Start small, journaling or opening up to a friend. I think those are the best ways to start. And if they want to explore a little more, there's a lot of sites where you can blog for free. You can submit your pieces to several news journals and online media organizations. There's a lot of opportunities to get your story out there.
So, Leah, my question would probably be answered in the course of you going ahead and telling your story, which I think is probably what we're all looking forward to hearing. But my question was, and you had stated in your introduction, you knew for a long time you were holding yourself back. Mm-hmm. I would be very interested to hear what went into that awakening of yourself to, I'm holding myself back, maybe as opposed to this person or this experience is holding me back. So maybe we should just let you tell your story, and that answer can come out as you share with us.
Yeah. So I felt like as a young woman, I had it all. I was a homeowner. I was married. I had my first child. I was living the dream, American life. In the Midwest, we really, we tend to go to high school, go to college, graduate college, get married, have a baby, and like follow this pattern. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that life, and so I happened to. I had that. I had all of that. And then life can turn in an instant, right? Things can happen in our lives that we don't expect, that we don't see coming, and our lives are turned upside down, and that's what happened to me. And I detail a lot of these, this kind of tragic evening in my book called A Star for Stella. And without giving away too much here, I will say that immediately following one summer night in 2015, I was hit with a custody battle and a divorce, and I eventually lost custody of my daughter. And so from going from being this successful journalist and having it all, and then to all of a sudden just feel like the rug is ripped from underneath you and you have nothing. You're fighting to prove that you're worthy enough to be a mother. That was my life. And that was my battle. But the underlying factor was there. I was an alcoholic. I was battling alcoholism for many years, and I didn't see it then because, you're in the party mode, you're in college and everybody drinks, everybody parties. But when you start to cope and deal with your stress or your anger or your emotions with alcohol, that's when it becomes a problem. And it was a problem for me. And what I didn't know at the time is that I was drinking a lot to cope with a lot of stuff that I had buried for so long. And so what those issues came out to be later on through therapy, I was a victim of child abuse and being sexually molested as a child, being only 5 or 6 years old. I had never told anybody that, except for my mother and father, when I was about 13. So that's, 6 or 7 years after it actually even happened. And so then I had it buried that long. But then after I tell my parents, the person who did that to me was already dead. And so there was nothing for us to do. So it gets buried, And so I didn't even realize this, but I had been dealing with the effects of that trauma on my life for so long. And I didn't realize it until, like I said, I was in therapy for, many, many years. And so it's been very eye-opening to see that trauma and the lingering effects of trauma can really affect us even decades later. I was in my 30s when I really started to, focus in on how to heal that trauma, how to move past that, and how to, not hold this feeling over myself that I wasn't good enough or that I had something wrong with me because this happened to me as a child. And so after, having all these realizations, I knew that I was holding myself back for a long time with alcohol. But I didn't know for a long time that I was really coping. I was coping. I was running away from my problems. Every time I had something wrong, I'd be like, okay, time for happy hour, time to go get a beer. I'm just going to unwind and forget everything. And so it was really exciting to be put into that part of my life. So that darkness and realizing that I am now in the fight of my life to even be a mother to my daughter was really my pivotal moment and my lowest point, or they like to say, your rock bottom, if you will. That was my point of saying, who am I and why am I the way I am? And how can I take these experiences in my life and make myself better? Because I knew I was made for more. I just had to get there.
interesting enough for me that you were a journalist already, successful. You had a good marriage, a child. Like you said, I had it all. Mm-hmm. Did you try? It seems like it was a disconnect between your trauma and what you were writing. So what was that award-winning article or piece that you wrote, and you became famous, recognized? And you also said that you had a kind of a gift and a skill, I would say, of journaling. And you never wrote that, you never went that deep. So what did you write about when you become successful? What made you successful?
Well, I mean, I was a writer for many years, and so I actually had several awards. I was a journalist for more than 14 years. And so there were several awards. So I can't list them off, but I do recall one that was very, that I'll never forget. And that's, when a tornado, swept Sioux, Iowa, and there was Boy Scouts at this camp, and the tornado killed some of them. And so we had to profile the children and the people who died and lost their lives. And so, having to pour your heart out and to capture a person's life in one article is like a huge feat. But being able to just kind of be empathetic and understand what these families are going through and trying to paint the picture that they want portrayed of their child and also all those things, went into my consideration of how I write this article. And so it was a team effort. We had several news stories about this horrific tornado. But I was a part of that team that we were awarded nationally for that.
It's amazing. You were around very talented people. Like you said, we had a team. Also, I did not hear yet, and we didn't hear yet about your husband. But so nobody, but maybe the husband, started telling you that, honey or Leah, you have a problem. So how did it start that you, and how did you feel when somebody for the first time said, Leah, you have a problem?
So we, I don't want to talk bad about anyone, but, we both had our problems, and we together just were problematic. And we had an unhealthy relationship, an unhealthy marriage. But we did love each other very much, but it was just not a healthy marriage. And so I know that was partially because of alcoholism, and partially because of his own issues as well. And so we just had a lot of dynamics that we weren't able to work through. We tried couples counseling and marriage counseling and all of that, and it just didn't work for us. But I will say that even though we kind of were at war with each other and really did not like each other for many years, we are in a great place now, and we're able to co-parent and be friends and joke with each other now, after all that kind of tumultuous time that we were in. But I think it's about growth. I think he went through his own growth as well, through all this. And, I did too. We grew up, when we got married when we were young, and, we were young, and we liked to drink together. And so that also added to the problem. So, I'm just very grateful that he's an amazing father, and also just is great with me as far as co-parenting now.
What is interesting to me that as a journalist, you never touched that topic before, and then here you're divorced, as I understand, that you did not talk about your personal issues, drinking, coping in the wrong way, in an unhealthy way, and then here you are divorced, and then you come out. And so, and that's what I thought, how difficult it is, I think, for a journalist, because it's not just what Scott had a good question, what held you back, but also I think professionally, it's like you have your reputation, and you have a bunch, a large group of people who follow you, who admire you for your talent, suddenly to come out and say, listen, I'm just like you are. I'm a mess. I'm broken. Besides, I have a story from my childhood. I think did you think about the risk that what if it turns off or away from you a bunch of your followers, maybe even all of them? Was it the risk?
No, I wasn't even worried about that. I think I was more interested in just healing, and I knew this was a part of that. I knew that, no matter what we do, there's always going to be the naysayers, there's always going to be, the haters, as they call them. But I knew that I felt like God was leading me. I felt like God wanted me to be this woman, to share my story, to help others, to talk about my faith, and to talk about resilience, because that's what I lived through, and that's what I experienced. And it was just kind of like, you can feel it in your gut, and you know that this is what you're supposed to do. That's how I knew I needed to share my story. I never felt that before, so it just came to me, I was going through this, but I think it's because I needed to have that growth. I needed to have that experience to be able to share with others and, to make an impact. And so, we all have stories. That's the beauty of this. We all have journeys that we can share with one another. And the power of storytelling is just truly incredible. Just sharing your story with one person can change their outlook, can change their perspective. So I love to push that out, that, there's so much power in storytelling. And, if anyone is interested in sharing their story, I love to help others do as well.
One thing I was curious about, you really, even though times were bad for you, it seems like you didn't give up on yourself. And I have known people that are going through really bad times, and when they kind of hit that wall, or we might say, well, they've hit bottom now, they sometimes have given up on themselves. Where did you find that strength within you, or did someone encourage you, or how were you able to pull yourself together and change your life in such a dramatic way?
Yeah, so it was not all like positive over here. It was rough. I was in a very bad place for several months. I would cry myself to sleep for countless nights. And I remember, I was fortunate enough to, at my darkest, most terrible time of my life, have a foundation of faith and family to go back to. My family, my parents took me home. They allowed me to move back home so I could get on my feet financially, figure out this divorce thing, figure out how I'm going to fight for my daughter, figure out my life, and I didn't ever think that in my mid 30s, I'd be living in my childhood bedroom, And so having that moment where you're like, I tell this story a lot, but I literally was crying myself to sleep one night, and I'm laying in my childhood bedroom, laying in the same, green walls that I painted turquoise when I was in 6th grade. And I had these glow in the dark stars still stuck up on the ceiling. And it was just like this. I was so embarrassed, and I felt so shameful that I had to be living here because I'm in my 30s. I was already a homeowner. Now I got to live with my parents. So it was, I felt like it was a demotion in life, but it was like a mix between my faith, my parents, and then I also tell everybody these glow in the dark stars that were on my ceiling were my reminder that my dreams are still out there. I wished on those glow in the dark stars as a kid, and those glow in the dark stars were still glowing, and they were still up there. And I just felt this, probably, not long after I was there, maybe like, oh gosh, just a few months, I just had this realization that, I don't have to be so down on myself. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But, I could still be great. My dreams were still out there. I could still go and do the things I wanted to do. And so that's what I did. I found a way to focus on the positive, even during the darkest time of my life. And so what I did was I went to grad school. all my friends are like, I can't believe you're going to grad school in the middle of your divorce. I'm going to focus this energy on positive. I need to refine mindset and just feel better about myself. And the one thing that always made me feel better about myself was education. I loved feeling empowered in the classroom. I loved feeling, learning and feeling like I'm growing as a leader. I knew that having my master's degree would put me in a better position financially as a single mother, and everything I'm going through. So it was just kind of like this win-win for me. And I knew I had to do that. And so to answer your question, Candy, I would say that, I was able to take all of these things that I had as I grew up with, my faith, my family, and then, dreaming big. Like, I had always been a big dreamer, and I didn't give up on that. Even though I was hard times, I found a way to stick to, knowing that I can still be great and I can still do amazing things regardless of, the situation I'm in. So I hung on so tightly. I prayed like crazy, and I went to grad school and I focused my energy there. And it wasn't easy. I was fighting with my ex and we were constantly arguing over our daughter and everything. And, I was made to be out like a monster of a mother, somebody who's worthless and doesn't care. And it was a hard time for me. But I was still able to take some of that and focus on the positive. And so I could have laid in bed and cried for days, but I had to get up and go to class. I had to get up and focus. I had to get back on my feet and go to work. So I tried to just focus on what I love. And that for me is, education, being a journalist, doing things. And so it was really about reframing my mindset from this negative thinking all the time and feeling bad about myself to finding ways to feel good about myself again.
You said something very important, and I'm glad I've heard it. So, Leah, one of the coping skills in the midst of crisis is to, like you said, reframe your situation and also pursue something new. And you pursued education. And what it did to you, it opened up, first of all, the whole field of knowledge and excitement. And it seems like it resonated with you because you're a person who likes and loves to study. Mm-hmm. But also, it kind of brings you to a new area of life, and you meet new people. And in the moment when your ex-husband or people who maybe try to put you down and say, oh, it's all your fault, when you say never give up on yourself, I think it's also so important what you've done. You pulled yourself out of those dark thoughts that kept you drowning. Could just drown you in negativity, but you made a decision, no more negativity. And you focused on education, new opportunities. Do I hear you right?
Yeah.
Seems like she froze. Yeah, okay. And I will cut this moment. I'm glad we're pre-recording. So, did you hear my question?
Sorry, I don't know what happened. It kicked me off.
You froze. You just froze. It's fine. So, my question was, and I will cut out this piece. My question was about coping skill, when instead of drowning yourself in negativity, you said, I reframed my situation. So I will repeat it quickly. Oh no, I have it actually recorded. So my question was about coping skill that is connected to reframing situation, and also you chose to pursue something new. And this is in situations like yours when everything is dark and maybe too many people say that it's all your fault. Instead, you chose to go and pursue education. So could you talk about that? And then I will cut out that piece.
Yeah, I had always wanted to go back to school and get my master's degree, but it just didn't work out when I was married. We had other focuses, as a married couple. excuse me. And we also just, financially didn't think it was the greatest idea. And I just never did. And I often put it off. But, once I was going through my divorce, I was like, this is the perfect time, to refocus and put my energy towards something that I love and something that I know can move me forward, career, leader, and financially, better career opportunities. And so it was just a no-brainer for me to pursue college and pursue grad school, even though I was going through the most difficult times of my life with a divorce and custody battle.
If I could ask you a question about that, because I think maybe of all the things you've talked about, losing my daughter might have been the hardest piece for me, I think. And so I wondered how old she was at this time, and if you were able to visit. I hope you got to see her. And now I'm a grandma, so having my grandchildren in my life is one of my greatest joys. And I wondered if you were able to kind of stay connected with her, because I would be so fearful of losing my child, and then my child might not know me. And I don't know if I just don't know if I could cope through that. And so I'd love to hear about how that went for you.
So yeah, I visited my daughter, come over with me at my parents' house. And so I still got to see her twice a week, a couple times a week, and every other weekend. But from being with your daughter every day of her life to not being with her but a couple of days, that was heartbreaking for me, and I'm her mother. And so I felt like the smallest, tiniest piece of what, because I didn't know what to feel, I didn't know how to feel. My parents have always been amazing parents. And so for me to feel like I wasn't good enough to be a mother, or I wasn't worthy to be a parent, was just like this nasty, dark cloud that followed me around for so long, And luckily, we have such a tight relationship, so she would never forget me. And but, it was very difficult. Those days I was without her. And one thing that kind of and I'll tell you, is how I knew my old trauma was coming up was when my daughter was the same age. She was the same age when I experienced that trauma myself. That's how I knew that I wasn't healed from that, and I had problems with that trauma coming up, because I would have nightmares that something was happening to my daughter, and I would be fearful to let my daughter go with and just anyone, because I no longer had control. I didn't have full custody of my daughter any longer. I didn't even have any custody. I was just able to visit her a little bit, and so I was fearful. I had so much fear and anxiety every time she left me, because I didn't know what she was going to happen to her. And she was the exact same age that happened to me as a child. So can you imagine what was going on in my head? I had nightmares, and I'd wake up crying, and it was brutal. But I will say, the bright side of that situation was I was able to realize, wow, this is still coming up for me. This that I experienced is still there. As much as we try to bury it and bury those things that happen in our lives, they don't leave. They don't leave our bodies. Our bodies still remember those things. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity, because I was able to, go to therapy and work through that and take a good look at what was really happening in my life. And wow, let me tell you, I just kind of opened these doors to amazing realizations once I knew that. So even though she did leave me those days, I will say that there were several realizations because of that. So in my heart and my mind, I believe God led me through all of these moments, because I had to go through them to heal, and I had to heal and start to heal to help others.
What I listen to and I hear so happily is connected to who you are. It's another side of you. It's a mindset coach. Because I think, telling your story, how you went through this dark time and you had this anxiety, it's like I cannot connect even with my daughter. I don't even see her, or unless it's for a short time. I cannot be a part of her life. What's happening to her? But then now we see that you're a mindset coach. What does it mean? How did you come up with that?
So, it actually just kind of started as I was helping other women who want to be writers and speakers. So I would coach them, and I would edit their content. I would edit their stories, their blogs. I would help them with their speeches. Like if they were planning to speak at an event, I would help craft a speech for them. So I was doing the writing and the editing a lot for some of these women that I was working with, who came to me because, number one, they knew my story, they've heard me speak, or they knew me as a journalist. And it turns out that these women were great writers, but they didn't have the mindset or the belief that they could do it. So really, I ended up spending more time coaching these women how to believe in themselves, that they can be an author, I can be a writer. I'm a published writer? No way, They had all these limiting beliefs around the idea that they could be published and they could actually call themselves writers or speakers, that I ended up doing mindset work and readings and helping these women understand, that they can do those things. And it's really just kind of the stories, the make-believe stories that they're telling themselves. And so that's where it kind of was born out of. And then I just started speaking different places, talking about mindset, talking about, changing, reframe, like I talked just from my personal story and my personal perspective. And it just kind of turned into more. When I was writing my book, I wasn't taking on many clients just because I didn't have the capacity to do that. But now that my book is done, I am working with more women who are now sharing their stories and doing that same thing. So even though we call it mindset work and mindset coaching, it is about writing and sharing their stories as well, because that's kind of my passion. Not kind of, it is.
So you, in talking about being a mindset coach, I'm sure some of the things that you would bring up would be the ways in which we hold ourselves back. Can you just share a couple of maybe the top 2 or 3 ways that we hold ourselves back from being fully actualized and successful and effective?
There's so many good ones, but the number one thing that I see is this comparison syndrome, especially with social media and everything we see. We feel like we don't look like a certain person in the magazines, or we are an author because we don't write like that person that's in that blog on Facebook, or I saw this great piece on LinkedIn. I can never do that because people start comparing themselves, and it just kind of puts us in this box, and we can't break through because we're afraid that we're never going to be good enough like that other person, or we're never going to be as good as that person. And so what I like to help, mostly women, but the clients that I work with, that comparison is like a never-ending road to negativity, because you're never going to feel good about yourself when you're comparing yourself to someone else. So I try to work around that and finding how, instead to compare yourself to somebody, you instead then focus on what you love most about yourself. And it's kind of, it's really sounds like a really simple trick, but you'll catch yourself doing it. I mean, I still catch myself saying, doing comparison things like, I'm like, this girl posts really great Instagram reels, I need to do more like her. And I'm like, no, take a step back. Your content is great too. You're just, telling your story a different way. So being able to catch myself in those moments, but it's just, comparison is a huge one for sure. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the second one I would mention, and that's self-doubt. Just not having enough of confidence in yourself, or just the experiences of positive experiences, or experiences where you feel like you're excelling in your life, having enough of those to believe that you can actually accomplish what you want. So those two kind of go hand in hand. I would say those are for sure 1 and 2. But as far as a third one goes, I would say, let me think about this. I think that when you start to look at the patterns that people have, and when they want to break free from their habits, or they want to move forward in their lives, the third thing I would say is I see a lot of is just time management. Being able to break free from what you're normally doing, and I guess move that energy and put it to what you should be doing. So being able to take time you're doing scrolling on social media, or binge watching Netflix, or partying late at night, or doing things that don't move your needle forward, those add up. And if we're doing the same things every weekend, you're never going to accomplish that goal, because you're not moving your needle, you're not spending the time. And so a trick that I like to share with some of my clients is just being able to commit 5 hours a week, no matter what that looks like, to your goal, to move your needle forward. So if you know that you want to write a book, let's say, and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to write this book, but I'm not at least giving 5 hours a week to it, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But if you can say, oh, look, I'm looking at my schedule and I have a window of time on Saturday, I can commit 5 hours to writing. Or if you want to do 1 hour a day through the week and break it up, that's great too. You're definitely going to move your needle forward. But a lot of people are so busy, and that's the biggest excuse that they have, is that I'm just so busy and I've got so many things going on. So forget all that, forget everything else, and just commit 5. Take 5 hours of your week and commit it to your number one priority goal right now. So what is that goal? What does that look like? And how can you dedicate 5 hours a week, just 5, not a whole day, not 20 hours a week, just 5 hours a week, to move your needle forward and make that goal happen?
Wonderful. I can't help but think that that process of dedicating 5 hours of your time a week actually points to an exercise in kind of looking at your values, right? What do I really want to achieve this week? And the 5 hours that I'm not doing this, but rather doing that, helps me identify maybe those things I used to be doing before really don't have a lot of value in my life. But yet this other thing that I want to do does have greater value.
Right. And the other thing is I was, this exercise was extremely personal for me and important for me. When I started working through my own kind of issues and what was holding me back, when I realized that, I was going to give up alcohol and live sober, and, committed to that, I started looking at my time, and I wrote down my schedule, how I spend my time, and I was spending 10 hours or more a week drinking. That's a lot of time. So if you think about that, you also think about the money I was spending drinking, that's also a lot of money. So not only have I added so much more time back to the things that I enjoy in my life, that the things that are moving my needle forward by living sober. I'm now more than 2 years sober. But the time that I have to commit to my goals, but it's also so nice to be financially free and not to worry about how I'm going to make my bills, or how I'm going to, pay these debts down, because I'd rather go spend my money at the bar, That was my life. That's what I was before. And I'm so thankful that I am in a place now that I can share that, because I know a lot of people can relate that, especially now, as we come out of this pandemic, so many people had to become their own bartenders. They started drinking at home more, and people are drinking all this, more than they ever have. They're buying alcohol more than they ever have. And so it's important to talk about these things. It's important to shed light on the fact that you can live sober and be successful. Even if you were a wild party girl like myself, who went out 10 hours a week, to the bar, to parties, or, just drinking at home, you can change, you can live, and be your best regardless of what you've been through. You can be the best version of yourself no matter what you've experienced in life, no matter the traumas, the failures, the mistakes. You can still be your best.
This is so good what you said about values and how much time you actually discovered in your life. You mentioned your faith, and you mentioned that prayers helped you, and that you prayed yourself. Besides that you were crying yourself to sleep, you also prayed. Mm-hmm. Could you share, are you comfortable to share about your faith?
Sure, absolutely. So, my family, I'm Latina, my family's Mexican, and we grew up Catholic, and I was raised in a Catholic church. I went to a Catholic school, and I, was raised loving church and loving God and praising the Lord for all the great things in our lives, So I really got closer to God during hard times because we talked all the time. We had conversations every day, and I hadn't prayed like that ever in my life. I didn't get on my knees and pray through tears ever like life. And so I was at a point where, God and my faith and I love my Christian music, that was, that kept me going, and just trusting, even though that things weren't, perfect yet, and things were, they were still slowly getting better, but things were still not right. And, I was still living with my parents. I just trusted God that things were they were going to happen for me, and things were going to, be okay. And, my parents, I really credit my parents for giving my brother and I that strong faith, because we still, go to church together. We still pray together. We often still, when we drive by a church, we make the sign of the cross. We're a very holy family. And so, I take pride in that. And, my daughter goes to a Catholic school. And so, I hope that I'm also instilling that in her now. And so my faith has been the most important component to my recovery, the most important component to knowing that, I can still be successful as a single mother. And I trusted God throughout that whole process. And I probably wouldn't have done that if I didn't have that faith, that faith foundation with my family as a young person. So I credit that to my parents. And, my mom would tell me, she would rub my back as I was crying. I couldn't stop crying some nights. And, I was living in their house. So she would come down to my bedroom and she'd rub my back and she would just say, just give it to God, just everything's going to work out. Just trust his plan and just trust that this is part of your journey. And, I'm like, trying to be positive with my mom's words. And I'm thinking, how can, she be so positive in a situation like this, because I couldn't see it, but now I'm like, wow, this was a part of my journey. This was, there's a reason that I had to go through all of this, because I had to heal. I had to grow. I had to become the woman I am. And I don't know that I'd be sober or even, where I am today as a speaker, as a a writer, as an author, if it weren't for those hard times in my life. Because, my speech went viral because, I was the commencement speaker. I was the commencement speaker because I was divorced and, living with my parents. And so I believe that all of those things happen for a reason. And I 100% credit it to God and his plan for me.
That's amazing. But a difficult question I want to ask to you.
Sure.
You mentioned your trauma. Mm-hmm. And here you are having your roots in faith, and your parents encourage you. Many people fall off religion and faith because of, first of all, anger. They start questioning, like, God, how did you allow that to happen to me as a child? And also, since you are a woman, and there are two questions here. First of all, how did you not turn you angry against God? But second question, as a woman, I've heard so many times that women cannot even call God as a father, and probably in Spanish is padre, right? So because that they associated with some abuse in their life. How was it for you? Did you ever struggle with calling God Father after that?
No, that was never a struggle for me. I never questioned. So young happened that and I had buried that down for so long that my faith, I think, I didn't ever question or ask God, why that had to happen to me, or I think I did had that conversation in general. Like, I wish I knew, I wish I could have spoke up sooner. I wish I could have, not been afraid to tell anyone when I was a kid. I wish, I look back and I remember having some regrets around opening up about that. But never was my faith ever. I'd never had a problem calling, God my Father, or even just questioning whether or not, why that happened to me, to God or to my faith. That was never an issue. I think mainly my issue was around my own reasonings and regrets about, I wish I would have told someone sooner.
And that's a good answer. Not a good answer in terms of like, that's what I expected,
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me that. No, but I think it's a very healthy answer, and it helps, I hope, our audience to understand, especially women, that when something happens to us and we turn it against God, God did not do that. God did not make you suffer, but it happened because the sin in the world is so big, and it's about all of us. So that's what I think. It's an encouragement, especially you as a writer, to write about it, to speak about it, to make it known that it's because of the sin. People have this evil tendency in themselves, and that's what I think we need to fight it together. So any questions from this point, Candy or Scott? Because that's a huge conversation, very, very important.
Leah, what would you say to somebody who is locked into the mindset of, I'm a victim?
Well, that's a big question. It just kind of depends on that person's situation. However, I always come back with, so am I, and so are a lot of people, and we all have traumas, and we all have experiences, and so it goes back to me saying that no matter what happens to you, we're never alone, and so. I guarantee there's somebody who's also experienced something that person's going through that has that, victim mentality. And so, what I try to do is, especially if someone is feeling like, they can't move past that feeling, is I try to comfort them with other people who have had success with moving on and had similar experiences, just so that person can, number one, see it's possible, and number two, to understand that, again, we're not alone. Sometimes that's all it takes is for a person to see that, oh wow, this also happened to someone, so, or this other person has experienced the same thing I went through. That is, I'm not kidding you when I say it, almost like it just leaves a little tension from your body, because it's like
liberating, huh? Yes.
Because the reminder that we're never alone, there's somebody there to help you who's experienced something similar. And that, like I said before, we can get through this together, get through anything together when we have the courage to share our stories to each other, and really uplift each other.
This isn't a question so much as it is just to let you know, Leah, how much I appreciate your honesty, how much I appreciate the fact that you're willing to tell your story just as it is. I think that would do so much to encourage other people who are going through this. And I can tell by listening to you that it's helped so many people. I think what it would encourage people to do maybe also is to get some help. If you need to talk to a counselor, or if you need to be in some kind of a group for support, don't be afraid to do that, because I think that's just so important to never give up, like you say. And I think that is the thing to never give up on yourself. And I so appreciate your story. Thank you so very much for sharing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Candy. You know, I have a kind of a funny story. I remember reading an article about there being a stigma that people were afraid to talk about therapy. And so I remember just kind of like having a conversation with some of my friends who were also in therapy, and we're like, therapy is the best thing ever. Like, why would anybody not want to talk good about therapy? But, you know, I do notice that I do kind of still get that from people, and they're like, "Oh, you're in therapy? You don't need therapy." And I'm like, "We all need therapy," you know. But yeah, so my therapist is he keeps me on my toes, and he straightens me out for sure. I appreciate more than he ever knows, and I remember too telling some of my friends. I said, they're like, "What are you going to do this weekend?" I'm like, "I'm probably going to hang out with my therapist, like just go, you know, have a session with a therapist." And it's funny because now it's like my life is completely different from what it used to be, but I couldn't be happier.
Wonderful. I will display the name of your book on the screen, A Star for Stella, and I'm very, very eager to read it as soon as possible. Also invite our audience to write to you and visit your website, and here it is on the screen. So please send Leah your questions, your stories, because she's a writer. She might even use it in her writing. But also what I want to thank you for, Leah, is that learning out of your experience, you were able to learn how to help other women, and you started, as you said, just professionally, but mindset coaching. I guess this is another thing that each of us needs, because sometimes we defeat ourselves, or we self-deceive ourselves. With self-deception or self kind of deceiving are two huge obstacles in our lives. So I invite our audience to follow Leah. I read her blogs, articles, book, whatever she writes, and I will follow you too. And maybe one day we will invite you again, because your story is absolutely important. And it is so easy to fall into habits and forget about our talents. And also what you were able to do, you use your story, your trauma, into something that built you up. And you turn out to be even stronger than before this all tragic things happened to you. So thank you so much for sharing with us. God bless you. And we hope that your faith will continue guiding you and be that light that lights your way, but also becomes like a beacon that brings people to you, because you have the energy and the stamina and the inspiration that might help other people. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
God bless.